Chapter 15. Closely Watched Blondes. The famous fear merchant had... oh, of course, there we go. The famous fear merchant had settled down in an expensive weighing chair, comfy to his bulk. At this point in his career, he looked like E.T.'s grandfather. His head was pressed close to the eyepiece of a tripoded? Powerful telescope. Oh, okay. Wow, okay. I'm not even reading this properly. I'm leaving this in. This is organic. His head was pressed close to the eyepiece of a tripoded, powerful telescope that poked out from a window into the soft Laurel Canyon night. A mile away, the bedroom was brightly lit. No curtains, torn or otherwise, blocked the view. The blinds were up. The future Lady Bountiful of Monaco was about to perform the single greatest act of charity of her charmed life. Slowly, thoughtfully, as if returning from a night on the town, Grace Kelly disrobed. Her hat came first, then her gloves. The straps of her evening gown slipped down from white shoulders, allowing the sensuous crepe de chine to glide to the floor. There was a broad unsnap. The last to fall were her French lace panties. Across the shadowed canyon, Cocky, the obese's one's nickname when he's been a schoolboy back in England, rose to the occasion. Scopophilia, the gratification of sexual desire through gazing, is the cleanest of kinks. The scopophiliac is safe from flesh contact, germs, and from the squeeze plays that might court rejection. Linked as she was to him only by polished optical lenses across the abyss, the lovely ice-blonde ex-model from Philadelphia had consented to indulge Peeping Owl's whim just this once. It would be over in a mere 5 minutes when she snapped off the lights. Years later, when she had eluded his control and captured one of the few remaining crowns in Europe, a petulant Hitchcock was sometimes to be heard grumbling about the co-ruler of the wee land of roulette twirlers and his ex-actress wife, who he then referred to as, quote, Princess Disgrace, end quote. Lose one, find one. The agreement between Alfred Hitchcock and his subsequent ice-blonde leading lady, Tippi Hedren, put this former fashion model under bondage contract for 7 years, shackled her first name in quotes, and put the seal on the strained, obsessive relationship that produced The Birds and Marnie, two of the director's more perverse thrillers. While shooting The Birds, Tippi agreed to the dictates of the master of suspense. She was to be tied down while live birds, bound to her body, pecked at her parts. One little pecker nearly blinded the lady as she suffered a nervous collapse. Hitchcock's misogyny, his enjoyment of brutalizing beautiful women on screen, had reached a fever pitch a few years earlier, when in 1959 Audrey Hepburn had refused to work in No Bail for the Judge, a movie he had been preparing especially for her. It was to feature a graphic and nasty rape scene. Too graphic for Audrey, who had recently emoted quite religiously in The Nun's Story to much acclaim. She begged off, pleading pregnancy, just as Vera Miles had 2 years earlier in backing out of Vertigo. No Bail for the Judge became an abandoned project at a cool loss of $200,000, and in its place, Hitchcock made Psycho, with its rape-like shower killing. His later movies seemed to lay the blame on women for stirring uncontrollable passions in men. Despite Hitch's chaste devotion to his wife Alma, the woman he used to jest who saved him from, quote, going queer, end quote, he developed a powerful romantic and sexual obsession for Hedren. She was the right blonde, but at the wrong time, in the director's souring love life, and paid dearly for piquing his passions. It had been planned that during the climactic avian attack in The Birds, mechanical trick chirpers would be used. When they did not appear lifelike enough, the director insisted on the use of real ones. For an entire week, Tippi was pelted with frenzied love crows and seagulls. She was bound to the floor by concealed elastic bands. The nervous beaked creatures who had been attached to her dress by nylon threads were then encouraged to peck at her person. One bird did its best to claw out her left eye. The incident left a deep gash on the lower lid. The actress gave in to hysteria. She finally broke down completely, causing a full week's halt in production. Jesus Christ. With their next film, Hitchcock became even more possessive and domineering. While the Birds had been shooting, he had plied Hedren with martinis during rehearsals. During the making of Marnie, beyond scopophilia, he was plying himself. This odd Beauty and the Beast courtship lasted for some time. During it, Hitch sent a peculiar gift to Melanie, Hedren's 5-year-old daughter, a custom-made portrait doll of her mother, dressed and coiffed as the character she portrayed in The Birds and enclosed in a small pine coffin. Later, he took advantage of a makeup session, which included tests for wounds, to order a life mask made of Tippi, which he then kept jealously guarded in a red velvet box. One day he would send her effusive and passionate letters. The next day she would receive cool, business-like memos from him. Although she informed him of her intention to remarry, she was going to wed her agent after completion of the film, he remained undaunted. He gushed that she was everything he'd ever dreamt about, if only Alma went to sleep and did not wake up. The screenplay of Marnie had been seen as a symbolic exposure of the director's futile pursuit of his star. In it, a frigid kleptomaniac resists her husband's advances on their honeymoon and then attempts suicide after he rapes her. Jesus. During its filming, Hitch pursued his old lech's dream. He must have sensed that wheelchair and pacemaker were lurking in the wings for him. The movie became a senior citizen's cri de coeur. One day, halfway through the film, he propositioned Tippy in her trailer. The essence of the scene was a Victorian melodrama. The villain threatened to ruin her if she would not comply. She would not. From that moment on, he refused to address her directly on set. He would inform his assistants to tell that girl to blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I don't like this guy. I really don't like Hitchcock. His physical and moral decline was marked after Marnie. Severely depressed, he inserted into frenzy the most brutal and terrifying rape scene he had ever put on film. Jesus. References to bondage abound in Hitchcock's films, yet it was on his audience that he performed the ultimate S&M experience. He held them through spellbound in darkness, through cunning, through genius, through skill. Bound to their seats, the Fear Master tormented them to his heart's content. And unlike Grace and Tippy, they kept coming back for more. Just as a side note, did some research on Alfred Hitchcock. He was not only that creepy, he was full of himself, and he would constantly break the teacups when he would have his, afternoon tea sessions, being very British. He would literally toss teacups over his shoulder, hear them break, and just move on to a new set. So if anybody was ever, deserving of being just pushed out because there's something wrong with him, I think Hitchcock probably would have suffered that fate if he was making movies today. Thank you for listening.